Hello, it is Meg Linehan. You are listening to Full Time. My esteemed co-host, Tamerra Griffin, is on vacation this week. So that means producer Theo Lloyd-Hughes is on the mic with me, which also means I get to pick his brain about what's happening with the Houston Dash, because there's a lot of news happening of late. On this first part of the episode, we're going to be diving into all of the off-season moves and chaos in the NWSL and check in on those stadium plans for Boston. We've got plenty of news on that front. And then in part two, we're going to be joined by the Athletic's Laia Cervello about the Spanish women's national team, the new Netflix documentary on what happened at the World Cup. So P.S., if you have not yet seen that and you don't want spoilers, though everything happened in real life, are there really spoilers for a documentary? I don't know. But we're going to be talking about that. 16 months on from winning a World Cup, where the team is, where the professional league in Spain is, a whole bunch of really good stuff with her. So stay tuned on that. But first, Theo, hey, welcome to the video side of things.
Hello. Good morning. Yes, it's quite nerve-wracking, isn't it? Trying to do my best Tamerra Griffin impression. Bear with me, listener, viewer. I will try my best, but it's lovely to be here. Lots to get onto. So much happening in the NWSL, isn't it? It's breathless.
Let's start with Boston, because I feel like Boston has always, I feel like we've also, we're going to do a mailbag episode next week. We have already gotten a whole bunch of questions about Boston.
Thank you so much for your questions, by the way. It's been amazing to see them fly in. And please, this is your final call. Get those questions in for next week.
Right. All right, so Boston Stadium is kind of the big thing. Obviously, they have now hired their general manager, so things are finally starting to happen on the soccer side, but then they have this press conference, Zoom, with their controlling owner, Jennifer Epstein, and their new general manager. And the first question is, of course, about stadium, not about general manager. And Jennifer Epstein is like, I would really like to focus on the general manager. And it's like, we would also probably really like that, because it's a lot easier to cover. But there's been some progress on the stadium side, because there's two parts to this. There is a money part, in which it was revealed last week into this week that the costs for the stadium, of course, have gone up. So the city was originally planned as of July to be on the hook for $50 million. That number is now $91 million.
Oh, that's almost twice as much.
Yeah, total cost now probably somewhere in the $200 million territory for the stadium, which is honestly not surprising, because
it's Boston.
It's Boston, but also the stadium has really fallen into disrepair. There was a fire in the stadium which has rendered half of the inside of it unusable. So it's not that surprising that the construction costs are going to go up. Also, I feel like any stadium project, you start with one number and you end up somewhere completely different. So the money part, not great, because I think taxpayers are going to look at 50 to 91 million and be like, excuse me, not great. The other part too is that Boston has been in this legal battle with a group of neighborhood advocates calling themselves the Franklin Park Defenders, which is where the stadium is. And in November, there were these sort of back and forth legal filings where there has been a trial date set for March 18th for this to go through. What the neighborhood advocates, in a very short version of this, are saying is this is a public land issue, and it did not go through the approval process required by the Massachusetts Constitution for what public land should go through. And the city of Boston is taking public land and giving it to a private corporation, basically, aka the Boston NWSL team, which is kind of yes and no. But what is happening is now, with this in the legal process, the neighborhood advocates are saying, hey, we need more time to go through the discovery process to figure out what's really happening here before we go to trial. And so this week, we did get news that the judge has extended the timeline for discovery, which the neighborhood advocates consider a win, but has not changed the trial date, which Boston very much considers a win, because they are going to go ahead with construction at risk. Without this lawsuit being settled, they want to start building. They have to start building because they have a spring 2026 deadline to be playing games in this building. So they are going to start building assuming they win this lawsuit. So that is kind of everything you missed on Glee. too.
Love
Steal
that.
a phrase.
I also love that they have called themselves the Franklin Park Defenders, which is arguably a better name than Boss Nation.
I mean,
is there a world
many
where,
things are a better name than Boss Nation. So.
Is there a world where the Franklin Park Defenders and the Boston Unity, the ownership group,
BUSP, yes,
Thank
Boston
you.
Unity Soccer Partners,
BUSP as they are known. Is there a world where the Franklin Park Defenders and BUSP sort of come together? And
right now, probably not.
And they take the name and join. They get an ownership. They get a seat on the board. You know what I mean? I'm like, is there a happy ending here, Meg? Like, you talk about that. They're appealing to get litigious. They're appealing the fact that it wasn't like due process, right? Mm-hmm. But the Franklin Park Defenders, I also have seen from your, great reporting that they're also like, hey, look, private funds, private equity. Lack of trees, like they are also against it. It's not just about the due process, right? The club is gonna have to win them over.
Yes, I mean, very much the NWSL here as a concept is what they have issues with, because the stadium itself was built out of this charitable trust. So the stadium, White Stadium, is named for the guy who set up this charitable trust, which is managed by the city of Boston. So the city of Boston technically owns the stadium and will continue to own the stadium. Boston NWSL would sign a lease for it to use it, even though that they are on the hook for more than half the cost of, renovating the stadium. But I think where the neighborhood folks, and also there is this actual conservancy group involved, Emerald Necklace Conservancy, is that Franklin Park is one of these kind of historical parks, especially in the city of Boston, right? And so there is this sense of this is a community space, right? And so to bring in a private club, private team that is rebuilding the stadium, is going to take it over, is going to basically boot out Boston high school football, track and field, whoever's currently using the stadium, right? Like, the Boston NWSL team is going to basically say, like, you can't use this until November, which is most of, I would say, high school football season. So I think there's also that piece of it as well, in addition to, I think the number is they plan to cut down 154 trees in this park. Like, there's a number of reasons why. I think everybody has wanted this stadium renovated, again, just because it has fallen into such a state of disrepair. It's still being used by the city, by the community, and it's been stopped and started by the city of Boston for, honestly, I would say the past 2 to 3 decades of people, mayors, the schools trying to say, like, we should fix this place, and then it's always become a budget issue. So when the NWSL was being approached by the Boston Expansion Group, one of the big selling points was this public-private partnership, right? Jessica Berman talked a lot about how this could be the future of the league. And now it's kind of like what is falling apart at the seams at the moment.
Yeah, it also feels like a bit of a, NWSL's growing up moment too. This feels like something we've seen in other sports. I've certainly seen it in England and, NFL, this sort of city versus community versus private equity. Right?
I mean, you even want to put it in conversation with Chicago Red Stars, right? Laura Ricketts is out here actively campaigning for public funds of like, hey, they give them the men's sports team all the time. Why can't women's sports be a part of this? And I mean, what I think we always do forget is that, like, well, the public actively hates paying for men's sports teams. Right.
And as there's valid reasons there. So that's why I mean, it feels like the NWSL sort of growing up into big problems in a tough world.
Right. Right.
Should we cross over to a bit of other NWSL off-season chat?
I mean, because also things just keep happening.
Right. I mean, I feel like my inbox this week, I dare to think what it's like to work in NWSL communications and media this week when you have so many things to clear up. It was, listener, it was kind of roster deadline week. So all the teams had to make it public on Tuesday which players they had re-signed or released or waived or were in negotiations with. So it was a big sort of public communications week. And also, while we're talking communications, congratulations to Jackie Maynard.
Yes.
Of the Orlando Pride, who won Communications Team of the Year, the first ever. What a season for Orlando. Can't help but win trophies this year. So let's talk a little bit about free agents, and then we'll get to the other side of things, which was some big head coach and GM front office stuff. The big names, I think most people were catching Marta, still no contract. Kristen
Right.
Press, still no contract. Becky
Yeah, Becky
Sauerbrunn,
Sauerbrunn.
now
Yeah.
out of, and Caroline, no contract. Caroline, Press, and Marta, to their credit, had sort of messages from the club saying, hey,
We're working on this.
we're working on this. Please don't ask any questions. I loved North Carolina Courage. I thought was my favorite one, which sort of Caroline had her own sort of stanza in the press release being like, we are talking to Caroline. Please leave us alone.
Right.
So yeah, Meg, what do you make of this? We got some sort of big name free agents.
I mean, I don't think it's super surprising, also just because I think for players of this stature and honestly age, right, like they know their worth. Free agency is a chance for them to kind of say like, okay, what am I worth to you? Let me maybe explore the market. Becky Sauerbrunn, I think, is maybe the most interesting because I also think she is most likely to pull an Alyssa Nair and just be like, goodbye, right? And so I think everybody is kind of looking at that name and being like, what are you doing? Especially again with some of the less information provided by Portland. But I don't think any of these are going to be particularly surprising. I mean, Caroline is maybe the most interesting from a potential move point of view, just because there's so much attached to her name in the previous window of, before the injury.
Manchester United.
Yeah, Manchester United.
Big transfer fee, yeah.
Right. And so is that still on the table for her? TBD.
And you might get more money as a player if there's no transfer fee. So she's, like you said, checking out her value. She's an MVP in this league. She's has potential to be one of the best players in the world, definitely a Ballon d'Or winner, so I can totally see that. One player, or maybe one quirk of this roster announcement section, Meg, I want to talk to you about is Casey Curran, zero goalkeepers. Who needs goalkeepers?
Yeah, very optional, famously.
Very optional. And I guess the interesting thing, I mean, Eddie Franch from Kansas has had a really good stint there, was part of the 2022 finals team. She seems to be out. Although GM Caitlin Carducci did say, sort of in her press conference, very loosely that like, oh, we are negotiating with all or none of these free agents. I can't tell you who. So it was all a bit smoke and mirrors.
Very helpful.
Very unhelpful. But supposedly none of these goalkeepers are coming back. Although there was a lot of questions, understandably, about Almut Schult, 33 years old, only played the final 9 games of 2024, but looked fantastic. And
right.
She just had a child and it had said in interviews, I kind of thought I was ready to retire. But then she gets this short-term contract in Kansas City and plays great soccer. Yep. So do you think there's a chance that she comes back to KC? Or
I mean, I feel like they
have
to be trying to get her back. I mean,
right.
When you have her come in and essentially replace Adi Franch, right, who was their starting goalkeeper for basically the entire time that this team has existed again in Kansas City, I think there was this sense of, okay, we've seen essentially like the regime change for goalkeepers in Kansas City. And so I think it is maybe a little surprising, but that does, I think just basically knowing what we know, it's probably like a personal evaluation for her of like, do I want to do this another full year, right? Or is it time to maybe think about moving on or doing something else? And so it is going to be really interesting, but it's just so funny to like see some of, you think about the Orlando Pride email where it's basically like the whole team is coming back -1 and we're working on Marta, please leave us alone. And then to have Kansas City come in and be like, and we don't actually have a rostered goalkeeper right now. Like, I don't think we've ever seen that before in the NWSL ever.
It's a fun quirk. Don't get me wrong. There's reasons behind it. I'm not like trying to drag KC here. It's just funny. It's just interesting. Speaking of interesting, GM head coaching changes. Let's hop over. Let's go west to Los Angeles. Both out.
Yep.
GM out.
Yeah. Angel
head coach
City
out.
Yep. I mean, I don't think it's that surprising. Just also, again, we have seen what happens when new ownership comes in, right? And I think with Angel City, obviously the brand and the business and game day experience, like all of that is not in question. It has always been the performance on the field. So to oust Angela Hucles and to oust Becky Tweed is not all that surprising. I mean, I feel like, Becky Tweed, the vibes were there when she took over as interim, and then it did not work as a full season experiment. And so I'm not that shocked to see this shift happen. Now the question is, again, could Angel City do the funniest thing possible and go out and hire Casey Stoney? I mean, I would still like to think it's on the table. I do not know if Casey Stoney ever wants to come back to the NWSL after what happened with San Diego, but it is arguably the funniest possible outcome of what has happened at Angel City. But there is, I mean, I think this is a team that has to have ambition based on everything that they've ever said about anything ever. And so can they have a really strong hiring process? And now, like, none of these teams have the pressure of the draft anymore, right? And so that is, I think, why we're seeing some of these changes happening, because you don't have that artificial deadline of the draft happening in January.
And so what becomes fascinating about some of these moves in Los Angeles is 4 days after Angela Huckels-Mangano is let go as general manager of Angel City, she is then hired as the kind of very title verbose president of women's soccer and chief soccer operator of the Houston Dash, sort of absorbing the GM responsibilities in Houston, but not explicitly being given that title. And there's a little bit of sort of inside baseball there, because she is suspended through 2024 by the league. She cannot handle transactions. So she is not actually becoming the GM until 2025. Eric Ustrek, who has been sort of freelance consultancy GM.
Who came out of Orlando previously.
Former Orlando GM. He is the one actually handling transactions at this moment in Houston. So that's a little bit of sort of why the Angela thing in terms of titles has been a little bit confusing, because she's not currently doing transactions.
Yeah.
But, interesting, Meg wasn't unemployed for very long.
No, and what I do think is interesting too, I mean, Houston obviously has a lot to handle, and we've started seeing player transactions out of Houston as well, right? Like, they are picking players up as they are able to. But I mean, Angela Huckles was tasked with, I think, rebuilding Angel City following their first GM stint out of Enioluco, and I don't know if that was a successful rebuild. I mean, results wise, I don't think it has been. And so she's kind of tasked with more of the same in Houston. And I think Houston also does not have the reputation of Angel City, right? And so I think it is an even taller ask. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting to watch Houston's next couple of months. And again, obviously she can't be involved in player transactions through the end of the year, but I mean, we're at December 11th. They've got some time to figure things out for January 1.
Yeah, and like you said, that sort of first week of January where we would see the draft, but likely this year we'll see a slew of college-age players signing. I think that is when you're going to see Angela come into her own. And like you said, big test, right? One of the best fan bases in the world, one of the best cities in the world. I love Houston, but I do think Los Angeles is an easier sell for a lot of these players. So it is going to be a big sign of how Angela recruits. And I think she's someone who has done very well getting some top young talent and some kind of superstar veterans. And maybe she's been criticized for not having enough of those sort of prime age players. And it'll be interesting to see how she kind of does that in Houston, a team who I think have had more veterans and not much youth, and are really looking to nail getting these younger players in. They only have one ever under 18 player, which has kind of become the trend in the NWSL now, to see more of that. Can they get into that market? I think also, you talk about Angel City being an expansion side, Houston being sort of cursed. Angela, from her work in non-profits and her past life as a Boston Breaker and playing Boston.
Wow, you like...
I'm doing
we
my
don't
Steph
even
Young.
need Steph for the show.
I'm doing my Steph.
Yeah.
I'm doing my Steph. But look, she's someone that understands players. She's someone that understands community. And Houston needs that.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about like what Houston struggles for 10 years, not even just this year, it's about a club not communicating well with their city and their players. I think that's when I talk to people, it just keeps coming back to that. And I do think Angela has the power to maybe be the person to fix that.
Do you think Houston is looking at everything Orlando did over the past 2 years-ish, right? Like, I mean, this is kind of the joy of the NWSL, right? Is that teams really can put together a turnaround very quickly. And I think, to be fair, it's going to get tougher now under the new CBA, and the price tag has gotten a lot higher to get that turnaround in maybe a year, a single off season into a second off season, but it is still on the table if you invest. Are you seeing maybe the signs of this could finally be the time?
I mean, I think Houston, people that follow the club and fans will be so burned that they will not be that positive. And I also want to respect that, like, doing in Orlando is not easy, right? Like, I want to give that club some respect that, like, you can't just, like, overnight do in Orlando. But absolutely, getting the right people in, having a culture of everyone being brought in, like, every club says this, but you can see that Orlando was actually able to do that. To kind of go off that, though, I would be interested if Angela, picking up the phone, she's going to be tasked, her first task, obviously she can't do player transactions for another month, her first task is finding a head coach. And I do wonder if she goes to Yolanda Thomas, the assistant in Orlando, she goes to Giles Barnes, who, by the way, played for the Houston Dynamo, used to live in Houston, and she goes to Orlando and she says, hey, can I get some of those assistant coaches to be my head coach? That would be, I think, in terms of your question of, like, doing it in Orlando, why not bring some of those minds out there who have created that elite environment? And maybe that's how you do start things in Houston.
Interesting, because I do feel like everybody was kind of looking at where Twyla Kilgore was potentially landing, right? That she's still on that market.
She lives in Houston. I think those links are never going to go away.
So
she used to work for the club. No, absolutely. I mean, Twyla, Giles, Yolanda, I think those are going to be the names that most people will connect Sarah Loudon, hypothetically, too. Although I think her relationships with the club, maybe she's kind of moved on from Houston at this point, but I know she had real connection with the fans. I think the other name that a lot of people seem to be throwing out because of his relationship with minority owner Tim Howard is Landon Donovan. I personally would be shocked if Landon Donovan was named the head coach of the Houston Dash, but being so close to someone that has a lot of say in the club is something people are saying, but I don't necessarily believe it. I think also you could look abroad. I'm going to throw out a name, Martin Peter Ho. Used to work under Casey Stoney at Manchester United. Has done really good work with SK Brann in Norway. And I think if they were going to go outside the box, almost like when Juan Carlos Amaros came over from Real Betis, I think that would be an interesting name.
Yeah, man, Juan Carlos Amaros going to Gotham instead of staying in Houston is a real NWSL sliding door moment.
The butterfly moment. If you meet a Houston Dash fan in the street, they'll talk to you about that. They'll say everything was going right in October 22, and then Yael called an out of contract Juan Carlos Amaros in there. Yeah, sliding doors.
Yep. All right. Well, there's still so much. I mean, free agency is going to be back with us before we know it. Obviously, this is going to be a very different and strange offseason in the NWSL. No draft. In theory, I think NWSL is having some form of winter meetings just because, you know, that's kind of what pro leagues who don't have anything else need to do. So we'll be following that, obviously, here at Full Time. But, yeah, much to watch. I'm sure everyone in Orlando is just waiting for that email to hit on Marta's new contract, to say the least. All right. So there's always so much every single week. But if you want even more Full Time, you can always follow us on Instagram and TikTok for social stuff. We've got even more videos still coming out of the championship. We're at TA Full Time. You can also watch the full podcast on YouTube, all that kind of fun stuff. But we will be right back after this break. We are now joined by the Athletics' Laia Cervello, who covers both Barcelona's men's and women's teams. She's joining us actually from Germany, which is, I think, exciting for us, maybe less so for her. But she also covers the Spanish national teams, including the Spanish women's national team. All right, so let's maybe start by setting the scene a little bit with what has been happening with Spain's women's national team post World Cup win. I mean, obviously, everybody knows they won the World Cup. We all saw what happened after, but can you maybe give us a little bit of a timeline of everything that's gone on from August 2023 until this moment right now?
To me, it feels like it has happened more than 1 year because a lot of things happened, especially in September. So basically what happened is during the celebration, I think everybody knows that, but Luis Rubiales gave a non-consented kiss to Jennifer Hermoso, and then everything popped up. Luis Rubiales felt invincible. He felt that he had ratified his position in the federation, that he and Jorge Vilda were invincibles, that the World Cup was his from Jorge Vilda and Luis Rubiales more than the players. So they started to behave like everybody saw, touching his crotch on the tribune, and then just carrying the players as if they were like bags of potatoes, and then the non-consented kiss. So I think in that moment, the players, everybody did. I remember I was there, and I remember nobody noticed that. Just like after like 1 hour or something like that, everybody started to see like some videos on Twitter or on Instagram also, and then it all began in that moment where everybody was like, no, this is serious. So something serious has happened, and you could tell because everybody was saying Jennifer Hermoso, and she's like the joker of the dressing room, and she wasn't like that. She was more serious. She was kind of looking a bit worried, and what we know about the documentary was that Alexia Putellas, which is like one of the most closest people that she has inside the national team, she asked her what happened, and she was like, I think Luis Rubiales gave me a kiss. And at the beginning, as Jennifer Hermoso is a joker, she thought, okay, she's joking. This can't be true, you know? But then she started to speak to more colleagues about that, to more teammates. Okay, that has happened to me. But everybody was thinking that it was a joke because she wasn't telling, for what I understand, like super seriously, just trying to figure out if that was correct or incorrect, if she should be feeling good or bad about that. And I think it was in the bus when they were going to the airport when Irene Paredes, the captain, said, okay, this is serious, so we have to take it like the way it is. And then all the threats against Jennifer Hermoso from the federation started. They tried to force her to do a video with Luis Rubiales saying that all was good, that nothing has happened, that it was something mutual. And I remember like the federation signed a big communique by Jennifer Hermoso, and we know after like this long time that communique was never written by her. So it was like the federation just trying to normalize things, and that's it. The big problem they had is that didn't happen in a Supercopa de España, because if it was in Spain, probably everybody would have just moved on from that, and that's it. The problem was that it was like something that everybody in the whole world saw.
Right.
So it was not under Spanish rules, it was under world's rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is really interesting is just having like followed your coverage from the fallout, covering, the Athletic in general. I think everybody was kind of just watching this unfold in real time, just in terms of the fallout for Jorge Vilda, for Rubiales, for the federation in general. And it would take us probably like a full hour to kind of go line by line in terms of, I mean, like someone's mom has locked themselves in a church, right? Like it just kind of kept escalating and escalating and escalating. So I want to maybe skip ahead to the documentary that's out on Netflix, because I think if people are coming at this from a new point of view, it is a pretty good overview in terms of, basically everything that led into that World Cup with Las Quince and the players, having issues with the federation and some of the internal politics at play. But just in terms of like what you got from the documentary, I mean, do you feel like it was successful at what it set out to do? Like, did it achieve telling the story of this team?
I think probably half of it, because some of the persons who were not part of Las Quince, for example, Ivana or Olga Carmona, were in the documentary, and I think maybe their part is not that well explained. or at least that's what I was thinking that was missing the most, because there are players that maybe they are not that untouchable on the national team as, for example, Aitana, Alexia, Irene Paredes. So they were feeling, I think they had a different process, and at the beginning everybody saw them as traitors, and I think you can empathize more with them after watching the documentary. But I think I felt like I wanted to hear more from them. What led them to not say anything to Jorge Vilda, to just protect their positions and to just be assured that they were going to play the World Cup in August. That's what I really want to hear. I think Laia Codina explained her part, and she started crying while explaining it and saying sorry to her teammates. But it's something that I think it's missing, and probably it's more like the story of like the most veteran players, which are like Irene Paredes, Alexia Putellas, and Jennifer Hermoso, which are like three friends. They call themselves dinosaurs because they are like older than the rest, or they have been there forever because they are not that old, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's like the story explained by Jennifer Hermoso, Irene Paredes, and Alexia, and it makes sense because like the producer that was behind the story was like the same agency that is in Alexia Putellas, so it makes sense that it was in that part. But I missed some other parts, some other stories that maybe it's not the ones that we normally hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was really struck by too is just some of the internal politics of the team, right? In that, like, you get into those meetings between the players and the federation where they're all kind of sitting in the circle and there is a confrontation, and they realize, okay, we're not aligned in terms of how we're going to approach this moment. We're not necessarily in solidarity. And I think coming at it from a U.S. perspective, not just with the U.S. women's national team for soccer, but having experienced and seen up close, there was a situation here with USA Hockey and the women's national hockey team. And the captain of that team, knowing that they were about to boycott a major tournament, legitimately went down the line and called every single player who could conceivably be called up to break that boycott, right? And so, like, knowing that, I think in America, maybe some of the preparations for a moment like that are a little different, but that there are these moments of politics. And I even think about and I want to call it a scene almost, because some of these conversations, like, you can tell, like, they're fully aware that the cameras are on them, right? And it's between Jenny Hermoso and Alexia. And Jenny Hermoso is saying, like, man, I was crying on the bus next to you and you had no idea what was happening, right? Like, Alexia's like, I should have helped you more. And Jenny Hermoso is like, I was begging for help, basically. And so I'm just wondering, like, what you're taking away from, I guess, what it tells us about what these players are grappling with amongst themselves, even in addition to everything that's happening with their federation.
The thing is, I think they were that used to that kind of behaviors, but just like non-publicly, that maybe they were not aware of like the importance of like how serious that was. That's what I think. And if you see like your teammate crying after winning a World Cup at the end of her career, you can think that she's crying of him, like being overwhelmed by everything and everything that they have went through, because they have went through 2 boycotts in the history of Spain, like in the women's team, obviously. So I think it's quite difficult sometimes to notice like what is happening, and I do think that they didn't have the tools because when they won the World Cup, at the same time, they were losers of their own battle, which was trying to make the federation better and make it like a professional team. That it was something that, I mean, between the journalists that were covering Spain, were saying, okay, but if Spain wins, is it a victory for the players or for the federation? And it's just a shame that it has to be different. You have to choose the players or the federation. You know, it just has to be all together. But I think they had that feeling that, okay, we have won a World Cup and we have lost our battle. So Mapi León, Patrick Guijarro, all the players that are not in the federation with us, they have lost their battle also. So I think it was like kind of that mixture of feelings, and they didn't have the tools because they have lost it before they went to the World Cup. I mean, federation didn't speak to them for almost 1 year after saying we don't want to be in the collabs for Spain because we are not feeling well, like mentally. Federation saw that and they did nothing. So what can you expect from them in that term? So they didn't have tools. The team was broken. I think in the documentary and in one book that Mariona Calente just released, like I think 1 week ago, she told we were a broken team. I wasn't speaking to my teammates because I couldn't stand them. Like, not all of them obviously, but for example, like the Real Madrid players who were like the one that were kind of traitors to them. Yeah. So I think they didn't have the tools to do anything of what they did.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers, and just, having gone through the 2019 World Cup with the U.S. Women's National Team and kind of seeing the players versus the federation battle, but the World Cup coming out of that as a win for the players and that bigger argument that they're having against the federation. It is such a very different feeling around Spain. And I want to talk about too, the documentary obviously covers Rubiales and kind of his approach to running Spain's federation. It covers Jorge Vilda, how he got the job, how he interacted with players, between the bed checks and like checking their shopping bags when they would get back from being outside of their rooms. But they don't really speak in this, which is probably not that surprising. But where are both of these guys at right now?
Luis Rubiales has to face a judgment for everything that happened with Jennifer Hermoso and for other stuff that he has been doing during his whole presidency. And Jorge Vilda is training Morocco.
Yeah.
Something that I think it comes from, and this is my opinion, it comes from the agreement between Spain and Morocco to have the World Cup in 2030. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think it was like dirty play, and Jorge Vilda was asking, because during the press conference that Rubiales did, that was just one of the most embarrassing moments that Spain has had to go through in the last decade probably. He said, okay, Jorge Vilda, I want you to know in front of everybody that you are renewed and you have a pay rise. Jorge Vilda was asking for that pay rise still now. Yeah. So, and with lawyers and everything. So he's still training, something that I can understand given other circumstances.
Yeah. Just in terms of the players who did not come back into the fold, right? Who were not willing to maybe accept, I don't even know if I want to call it a compromise, right? But to come back in and say, I think the players that did come back were very upfront of just like, they had the World Cup over us, right? Like that is, I think, a very understandable thing where players are like, I'm not going to sacrifice the most important tournament. But there were a few players who did stay on the outside, like you think about Mapi Leon. So where are they now?
Mapi Leon is not still available for the national team more than 1 year after. I don't think, I don't know, because I think she probably doesn't know neither, but I think she probably never will come back to the national team after all that has happened and after missing her big opportunity of winning a World Cup. Patri Harrow came back a few months ago. She was there for the Olympic Games. But to me, there's one big name, two actually, which are Sandra Paños and Lola Gallardo. They are like Sandra Paños now, she is playing in Mexico, but at that moment she was the starter goalkeeper for Barcelona, the Barcelona who won the La Liga, the Champions League, everything possible. And she asked to be in the World Cup, and Jorge Vilda said no for sporting reasons. And you can tell by that decision how the federation is working, just wanting to punish players for being like bad kids,
Yeah.
And she had to be there. She was the best goalkeeper Spain had, and the second best goalkeeper was Lola Gallardo, the goalkeeper for Atletico de Madrid, who is still playing as a starter for Atletico de Madrid. And none of them is going to the National Cup ever again, probably. And they say that it's because it's the end of an era, and it's because they want to just renew the players and everything. But to me, it's really unfair, because they are two players that have made Spain better in terms of women's football, and you have to be proud of that and not punish that.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about Spain's current technical staff, because I feel like the person that they brought in as a coach is maybe just more of the same. Can you maybe fill people in if they haven't been following how the transition post Jorge Vilda has gone?
I think at the beginning, Montse Tomé made the team her team, and she tried to be super serious, saying to everybody and publicly in press conferences, I'm not Jorge Vilda. But at the end, she's kind of behaving like she is Jorge Vilda, and she was in Jorge Vilda's staff. She doesn't have any kind of experience training big teams, training big national teams. So at the end of the day, to me, it's the same. It's backing the staff that Jorge Vilda had, which were the same staff that the players were complaining about, and putting somebody in front of the best national team in the whole world that has no experience, instead of, okay, let's think who could be like a great name, a great manager, a manager that has a name, even if it's not Spanish. I don't know. They decided to put Jorge Vilda second, like his assistant. So to me, it's something very, very clear. And if you see like the last call-up, Irene Paredes, Jennifer Hermoso, or Misa were there.
Mm-hmm.
The three players, well, two of them were in the documentary.
Yep.
That was released just before the collab, and the other one is part of their kind of they are friends, so it's kind of the same kind of people. And the worst part is that Montse Tomé just tried to say, like, not literally, but she was asking for some good convenience inside the team, just kind of saying that the players were not taking good when they weren't playing as starters. Something that if you saw the World Cup, Misa at the middle of the World Cup, she was released as the starter, and Catacoll started to play as the goalkeeper. And she was helping Catacoll, so you can say that it's because she's treating her teammates bad. Or Jennifer Hermoso, everybody backed Jennifer Hermoso when everything happened with Luis Rubiales, and she's the leader of the team. So, and Irene Paredes, of course, she has been chosen by her teammates, so it can be something that is pissing the others. So to me, it's like cutting the leaders of like the revolution and saying, okay, I'm the leader here, so I don't want anybody to start doing revolutions again. And that has happened like every time that the players have done something similar. I can think of 2015 after the Canada World Cup.
Yep.
Vera Boquete was not called up anymore.
Yep. Right.
And she was like the best player Spain had.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I think she put like a tweet saying deja vu, and to me it's just like that. It's deja vu. It's always the same. So it's like that kind of behavior, like as a mafia that has the federation, that I thought after the best revolution like the Spanish women's football has had stopped, but no, it continues.
All right, let's talk about, we have seen some movement from Spain over here to America. I think about Giralda's coming over to coach Washington Spirit. We just saw Dome come over to be general manager of the new Boston team. We've seen some players come over as well. We've seen some commentary, I think, from players over in Spain about the quality of the league. So I'm just kind of, What is, I guess, just the vibe in Spain right now? Obviously, Euros are also on the horizon. Like, what should we be looking for around, not just, I think, the women's national team and the state of, like, whatever is happening still within that team, but just where women's football is in Spain right now?
I made a piece about that like recently, just trying to analyze what has been happening a year after Spain won the World Cup, and I think the answer is nothing, or almost nothing. Just like the Federation and La Liga F, they stop fighting each other, but this is not enough. It's just like something that has had to happen 10 years ago probably. You have like the best players in some positions in the whole world, and that never has happened in Spain, and nobody is trusting them, just Barcelona. But Barcelona alone can't do anything. They can win the Champions League every year, but in terms of the league that Spain has is super poor. You can see like some fields with artificial grass, some stuff that you would think about amateur football, non-real football, non-professional football. And after talking to all the clubs, they are all like, yeah, we can try to make progress, and we are putting just nutritionists, physiotherapists, psychologists, but at the end of the day, if the league is giving us the schedule for the next game 1 week ago, 1 week before, what can we do? I mean, we want to go by plane, but what if we have no place in planes because we don't have like enough time to manage and to book the things that we have to book, and the players have to sleep on coaches or on the bus or whatever. It's like nobody is caring about them. Nobody is putting like the structure, saying, okay, I'm going to believe in women's football and to invest money because I want to make like a really attractive competition. That is not happening. If you see like the La Liga Española, it's super boring to see, because you know that Barca is going to win the week before the competition starts. So the only excitement is, okay, for how far will be this season. It's going to be closer than the last one to Real Madrid or Atletico, or it's going to be like just Barca breaking records again against themselves because nobody can compete them. It's quite boring, and I think this only has one consequence, that it's probably that Spain is going to is going to lose talent at the end of the day, as has been happening the last summers, because the players, they want to compete every weekend. They feel so frustrated sometimes because they only win 1-0 to Levante Las Planas or to whatever the other teams are playing. So it's like they want to be competitive. They want that feeling that only Champions League is giving them.
Right. All right. Well, there's still so much. I mean, I feel like we could probably keep going for a long while on the state of things in Spain, but we appreciate it. We're obviously very much following your coverage here in the U.S., and we appreciate all the work that you're putting in to cover what is, as always, an evolving situation. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Theo, let's wrap this show up, but we've got to talk about some more U.S. Women's National Team games. They're so great at announcing the schedule. No one make an NWSL schedule joke here, but we know what the U.S. Women's National Team is going to be up through for most of the spring now, because they've just announced a pair of friendlies against Brazil, which is ideal for me. I really enjoyed the USA-Brazil gold medal match in Paris. We're going to get that twice more in Los Angeles, in San Jose. What are you thinking about these games, Theo?
It's a lot of Brazil, which I'm not mad about.
No.
I think Americans, NWSL fans, have had their fair share of Brazil over the last 10 years, and they're loving it. And they're saying, give me more. And the US Soccer Federation heard you and said, we will bring Brazil back over for 2 more games. I mean, I think my first reaction, I think I texted you this, was, are we going to see Marta? Doesn't necessarily have to be in a kit, but I'm expecting some sort of flag bearer, some sort of, I don't know, VIP experience. Like, we just got to have some Marta, right?
I mean, like, it is an ideal, I think, situation in terms of these are also 2 NWSL markets, right? And so I think there is a chance here for, honestly, U.S. soccer and Brazil to come together and be like, we can give Marta kind of like this big send-off moment in the U.S. where she is also obviously wrapping up her club career. So, yeah, I mean, like, honestly, give us a preview of 2027 party captain Marta ahead of the World Cup. I'm ready for it.
Freshly inked, like 2 months, a month after she's freshly inked that new Orlando Pride contract. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I don't want to sound just sort of like bitter, but I would like Brazil to win one of these games. You know, you talk about the Olympic final, the Gold Cup final as well, both very narrow 1-0 games where Brazil were good for portions and ended up getting outlasted by the Americans, as the Americans love to do. It would be fun if the Brazil could win one of these games. Just going to throw it out there.
It would be, I mean, the other thing too is Brazil fans turn up for Brazil. And so these are 2 pretty strong markets, I think, that are going to have, we're going to see a lot of canary yellow in the stands. I'm here for it, but also exciting too in that this is going to be the first women's pro sporting event at SoFi Stadium in LA. And so I think that's going to be, it's going to be an event, to say that game has event written all around it, especially 70K capacity. So hopefully they can get some good ticket sales. One
last shout out to Duda Pavao, who we did a great episode with. You can go check out, where she talked about Brazil getting awarded the 2027 World Cup, and she presented the presentation at FIFA Congress for Brazil. She moved to LA right after we did that podcast. So she will be loving Brazil being in LA. So just shout out Duda.
It's just going to be her and Marta.
Her and Marta.
Party captains. Duda and Marta. But so Duda, like, we're just assigning you jobs now, but be ready.
Be ready.
All right, let's talk about, too, some of the... I know that we had plenty of NWSL chat at the start of the show, but what I think has been interesting to watch over the past couple of weeks is the migration of folks from X, formerly known as Twitter, to Blue Sky, the league, finally hopping over. And while they have obviously not left X as a platform, they are starting to basically copy-paste stuff over to Blue Sky. But what I think is also interesting, too, to add into this conversation is TikTok is coming under a little bit of threat here of existing in whatever form it currently exists in the U.S. And we know that players... Trinity Rodman, in particular, loves a good TikTok. And this is kind of maybe the end of NWSL women's soccer social media as it has existed, I think, for about minimum 5 years, if not a decade plus.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time for social media in general. And there's definitely a conversation to be had about age groups and generations. You know, Trinity Rodman is going to be from a generation that is so native to TikTok, where there are going to be other players in the league who maybe favor Instagrams, you know, so on and so forth. I think what you're seeing from my mind, which I think is interesting, is NWSL media, and to some extent American soccer media, has really gone to Blue Sky. The rocket has taken off. Yeah. And we haven't really seen players there yet, which is interesting because a sort of quirk of Twitter was players or players' family members searching their names and sliding into DMs and saying, hey, why do you think my daughter, you know, has a bad cross? Which, you know, honestly, I loved. But we haven't really seen that on Blue Sky yet. I also think having a connection, or, you know, living in this global world, English media has not really gone to Blue Sky as hard as American soccer media, I think, which is interesting. And I can't really speak to other continents, but maybe I'm a little bit more attuned to Liga MX Femenil, and I think that's still a lot on Twitter or TikTok, like you said. So yeah, sometimes I'm like, is it a bubble? Is it an age group thing? Is there going to be a new app? Like, if TikTok goes, I would just think that something is going to replace it. And even if TikTok doesn't go, something is probably going to replace it for the next generation, right?
Right. I mean, that is kind of the way of social media. I mean, when as an old, right? I mean, I still remember the days of hashtag WPS chat at a set time every week, right? Like that was the social media social hour of WPS in the previous league. And so, I mean, that was too something that, the league was involved in, administrators were involved in, coaches would pop on, players would pop on. And so I think that kind of was one of the building blocks. Like, women's soccer has really, especially in America, I think, been built partially through, like, you have broadcast TV and you have social media. And those are the two, like, main vectors of getting people and their attention. And it is going to be interesting. I mean, and we've seen, for instance, Midge Purse, the deal for the offseason being with
exclusive.
X. Yes. Yeah. And so I don't think the platform is gone, but what I think has been interesting is seeing how maybe some of these vectors are changing in terms of where people are talking. I do think, to your point, the media has really flipped over, but fans, I mean, what was interesting is when I shifted over, everybody was like, oh, thank God you're finally here, right? And so I think there was a sense of, there are folks over there. It is a smaller platform, obviously, but engagement is higher. Yes. There's no, like, blocking links, so I think it does make kind of living in this bigger ecosystem easier because you can link out to things and not have it get kind of, throttled down. So it is, I mean, it's just going to be a very interesting thing to keep an eye on, especially for where players end up over the next couple of months, assuming something happens with TikTok. That's going to be, I think, a much bigger conversation if and when that happens. All right. That's basically the episode, but we want to make sure next week, mailbag, Tamerra will be back. We've gotten a whole bunch of questions, but we want even more. So make sure that you're emailing us at fulltime@theathletic.com. You can hit us up on our Instagram. You can send us a DM. We've got just basically a whole doc of all of your questions. We've got some really fun ones. We would appreciate even more fun ones.
Hashtag full-time mailbag. I just thought of that on Blue Sky. Yeah. Hashtag full-time mailbag on Blue Sky at Meg, Tamerra, myself.
I know. Yeah, we're all. I did make a starter pack.
Yeah.
For the full-time fam.
That's a fun quirk. Shout out Blue Sky for the starter pack feature.
I know, it's great. But also, like, everybody who covers women's soccer / women's football at The Athletic is in that. So
Laia?
I think.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yes, Laia's in that. So if you want to follow what is happening in Spain, just hit that little. It's pinned to my profile right now, so very easy to find everyone. But yeah, if you want even more women's soccer stuff, we've obviously got the full-time newsletter at The Athletic. You can subscribe to that as well. And yeah, mostly we just want your questions. Send them over. All right, full-time does not happen without podcast producer Theo Lloyd-Hughes. Theo, say goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks so much for having me on this side of the glass. I will be returning to my cave with the wonderful Tamerra back next week.
Unless we force you back on camera next week.
You never know. You never know.
All right. Video producer Leah Griffin and executive producer Emily Olson. Again, we'll be back with you next Thursday. Thanks for listening.